Jean-Michel Basquiat, un africano-americano con descendencia haitiana y puertorriqueña. En verdad como que yo no sabía mucho del tipo antes de ver el video que les voy a enseñar, pero antes del video se pueden suscribir al canal, sería de gran ayuda, y también hago directo en Twitch. Los links están abajo. Vamos para allá, vamos a ver el video. Vamos a reaccionar a este video, vamos ahora.
In 1982, at the age of just 22 years old, Jean-Michel Basquiat would produce this painting, a powerful and dazzling image that mixes text, colour, symbolism and mark-making in a raw and uncensored explosion. In a single painting, he would use his instinctive powers.
Este tipo no... Yo he escuchado Jean-Michel Basquiat, se me hace como que yo he escuchado este nombre antes. ¿Qué será?
A visual language to say everything he wanted to say about America, about art, and about being black in both worlds. In the New York art scene at the time, he stood out, not only as a black man in the whitewashed world of art, but also as an artist who brought attention to its ethnic imbalance. And he would become one of the few black painters to break through into international consciousness.
I don't know, black people are never really portrayed realistically not even portrayed in modern art enough.
Basquiat would show the faces and name the names of countless millions of people that had been disregarded by art history. He would shake the art world with paintings that depict the black experience. Paintings that would be placed in museums that were designed for a whole different audience. 1982 was Basquiat's year. He was a rising star at the height of his powers, and this would be his most mythical and sought-after painting. A painting that after its initial sale was not seen in public for over 30 years. In fact, only a tiny photo of it survived, as proof it ever existed. Then in 2017, it came up for auction. When Jean-Michel Basquiat was in New York,
yo creo que esto, si no me equivoco, la pintura se vendió por como 100 millones de pesos o algo así. Yo creo que por eso es que yo he escuchado Basquiat y yo he visto la imagen de la carabela.
In 1978, it was a low-rent, high-crime bankrupt
fue una de las pinturas más
Downtown Manhattan was a grubby
comprado.
mecca for the artist, the musician, and the filmmaker. Everyone was creative, and everyone was going to make it big. People assumed that Basquiat was an uneducated, uncultured graffiti artist from the ghettos, with an almost supernatural talent.
No, muchísima gente de la calle sabe un montón. Muchísima gente. Lo que pasa es que pues el street knowledge y como que el conocimiento de sacar A es bien diferente. So,
it was partly a deliberate myth he constructed himself, and partly people's expectations of what a scruffy, dreadlocked black artist could
también puede ser racismo.
But he wasn't the noble savage the press liked to portray him as. On the contrary, he was an intensely ambitious, middle-class young man who knew his art history, particularly when it related to the presence and absence of blackness in Western art.
Okay.
Basquiat was born to a Haitian father.
Esto era, ¿viste? Yo sabía que era puertorriqueño de algo. Ya reconozco por qué no tiene como que un Hernández o un Pérez, ¿tú entiendes? Es Basquiat porque influencia de Haití vía Francia vía Haití. Ok, y Puerto Rico, ok. Por eso es que se me hace famoso.
In a solidly middle-class household in Brooklyn. Privately educated, he was a gifted child who could read and write
Brooklyn,
by
que hay
the
un
age
montón
of
de
4,
gente de Puerto Rico allá, mucho boricua.
He was very close to his mother, who encouraged his artistic side. She took him to see Guernica as a child at the Museum of Modern Art, and enrolled him as a junior member of the Brooklyn Museum of Art. The young Basquiat would spend every second drawing. Unfortunately, his mother was committed to a psychiatric hospital when he was 13, and he would leave home for good at 17.
Eso es triste, hermano. Yo no sé qué yo hiciera si eso pasara, pero parece que hubo mucha influencia de la madre en el lado de arte. So, por lo menos pues le dio algo bastante
At
bueno
first
para
he
su
lived rough
futuro.
on the streets of Manhattan and in Fleabag hotels, graduating to friends and lovers' sofas and beds. Then in 1978, he would team up with an old school friend, Al Diaz, and they would form the street art duo Samo. Basquiat's career started with text. Under the pseudonym Samo, Basquiat and Diaz began spray painting on buildings in the Lower East Side. But while graffiti was about tagging, marking out territory, Samo wrote more than just a name. If this was graffiti at all, it was something quite different. They were poets and provocateurs, writing cryptic messages on walls next to art galleries.
Mr. Samo and his associate.
But for Basquiat, it was just a means to an end. He wanted to become rich and famous, and Samo was a way to get noticed by the press and the public.
Eso es prácticamente como una especie de quoting y como de graffiti hasta cierto punto. No sé. Si funcionaba, funcionaba, y en Nueva York no se me hace bien sorprendente que muchísima gente pues empieza a representar su arte de bien diferentes formas. Y graffiti, pues, aunque no es nada de otro mundo, en ese entonces, y no solamente graffiti, sino como que solamente poner palabras así, como que era un poquito diferente. So.
In 1980, at the height of their fame, he called it quits and went solo. He never considered Samo to be graffiti. To him they were statements and poems. Basquiat would be described as a graffiti artist or an ex-graffiti artist, a term that he thought tied his work with the uneducated and unsophisticated, a term he found
quizá
simplistic and racist. He moved into the East Village with Alexis Adler. Because he had no money for canvases, he would paint on the floors, walls, doors and furniture. Then he would make postcards, which he sold for $1 on the streets. It was while selling postcards in Soho that Basquiat spotted Andy Warhol at a restaurant. He was a big fan of Warhol's and was thrilled when he sold him a postcard titled Stupid Games, Bad Ideas. It features the noughts and crosses he will incorporate into Untitled.
There you go.
Warhol was intrigued by this paint-splattered street kid, and a couple of years later would initiate a collaboration and hook onto Basquiat's rising star. There was a marketable glamour to being a down-and-out prodigy, but it was an act for Basquiat. His reference points were fine artists like Cy Twombly and Jean Dubuffet, writers like Jack Kerouac, Allen Ginsberg and William Burroughs, and musicians like David Bowie and Miles Davis. Basquiat looked at how early rappers at the time used samples, and he would apply that to his artwork. In the same way musicians borrowed from James Brown, he borrowed from Rauschenberg, Picasso, African art, and referenced his own Haitian and Puerto Rican heritage. He would paint several canvases at once, have dozens of reference books around him, have music on full blast, and the TV on at the same time. His reference points were many and eclectic.
Warner Bros.
Anatomy, poetry, jazz, trash TV, typography, and art history.
So, crítica.
Enabled him to create visual collages, which were profoundly original and at the same time rooted in a rich linguistic history. He would fuse words and text together instinctively, like a musician. But it was colour that held his works together. Basquiat was a master colourist and would use oil stick with spray paint, crayons and acrylics, undiluted primary colours layered in rapid succession. And he would build his figures up by reinforcing and overdrawing every line and form. The words here have been scratched out and painted over, in a conscious borrowing of an old master's technique known as pentimento. This was a signature motif of Basquiat. He would say, I cross out words.
Yo estoy pensando en papiamento, que es en Curazao y Aruba y en esos sitios, pues como que un lenguaje,
you will
pero
see
no.
them more. The fact they are obscured makes you want to read them. He would use his work to highlight black heroes, and the double A we see in Untitled may represent Aaron, a reference to Hank Aaron, the celebrated African-American baseball player.
Exacto.
A childhood idol of Basquiat and the first of his heroes to be crowned or sainted in
No,
his
uno de los mejores, el
paintings.
mejor.
Crowns in Western art come loaded with historical baggage, and Basquiat would use the symbol of the crown to challenge notions of race and power. He would crown black heroes. For him, the three-pointed crown he used mostly represented athletes, musicians, and writers.
Writers.
The crown
Okay.
raises the disenfranchised to royal, even saintly status. Another symbol he used is the copyright sign. He used it as an ironic attack on the mechanisms of the art market, and as a sign of
Eso es
reclaiming
inteligente hacerlo.
authorship.
Son
The
una forma
coarse, spiked
inteligente.
lines we see in his works read as barbed wire, a common sight in the rundown New York of the 80s.
Sí, es bien
It has also
peligroso
been
en ese tiempo.
interpreted as metro lines.
Bien peligroso.
But it is the skull we mostly associate with Basquiat. In 1968, at the age of 7, Basquiat was badly hit by a car while playing in the street and had to have his spleen removed. As he recovered, his mother bought him the textbook Gray's Anatomy, which
Grey's
he
Anatomy.
memorized. Anatomy would become a central theme in the artist's practice.
Como la serie Grey's Anatomy.
That obsession is at its most unforgettable in his depiction of human skulls.
Bien parecido a Da Vinci, que también le gustaba la anatomía.
These are the skulls of generations of slaves, the voodoo skulls of Haiti, and the primitive African masks so long appropriated in Western art. Basquiat's career would coincide with the arrival of the neo-expressionist movement, a return to painting and the re-emergence of the human figure. And this raw and powerful image would announce the arrival of the virtually unknown young artist as one of the movement's leading figures. After finishing Untitled in January 1982, New York gallerist Anina Nozay gave him a studio underneath her gallery so he could work on his first solo show with her. A rumour started that a wild black runaway was churning out masterpieces while being kept in the basement.
That's just has a nasty edge to it, you know. I mean, I was never locked anywhere. I mean, oh Christ, no, it's just. If I was white, they would just say artist in residence rather than say all that other stuff.
It has been said that Basquiat's driving force
Might
was
be
a
true,
desire
yeah.
to be
Might be
accepted
true.
after rejection by his father. Fame gave him that, and a lot of money, but he would never be totally accepted. He sold his first painting to Debbie Harry of Blondie for $200, and within a year he was selling paintings for $20,000,
diablo.
faster than he could paint them. His solo show at a
Sí,
Nina
imagino.
Nozay gallery was a huge success.
Si le están pagando
He
un
found
cojón,
himself
pa,
painting in Europe
pa,
and
pa, 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 pa,
California,
coge.
living with Madonna and befriending Warhol. He may have been living a lavish lifestyle, but he still faced racism every day.
Hoy en día la gente tiene que pasar por racismo. Imagínate en los 80 hay una persona negra, latina, y haitiana, que no, depende si tú consideras haitiano o latino, en una sociedad, en una industria que no hay personas como él ahí. Obviamente van a haber un montón de críticas. Y racismo, pues, obviamente. Y más en los 70, 80.
He would leave successful opening parties and find it impossible to get a cab. In stores, he was always followed by a security guard. He would be refused entry into expensive restaurants, and once he was held up for 2 hours at the airport and questioned as to how a black man with dreadlocks could afford to fly in first class. For Basquiat, making it didn't mean getting a show, a dealer, or even making a fortune. He wanted recognition from major critics, curators, and art historians. The establishment. But there was prejudice against him, for his youth, for his graffiti connection, for being untrained, and for his subject matter. He met Warhol again in 1982, this time for a lunch arranged by his art dealer. Basquiat had always admired Warhol, and perhaps he saw this as an opportunity to reach the
La
art
conexión
world
entre Andy
establishment.
Warhol y
Basquiat went
Basquiat.
home after the lunch, and within 2 hours a painting was delivered to Warhol, Still Wet, of him and Basquiat. This painting started the deep friendship between the two artists, and their collaboration began. It is a myth, though, that Basquiat's career really took off when he hooked up with Warhol. He was already famous, or Warhol wouldn't have been interested in him. Their relationship, both professionally and personally, was symbiotic. They needed each other. Warhol's career had stagnated, and he needed new life breathed into it, and Basquiat needed access to the art world elite. Their second exhibition of joint paintings in 1985 was slaughtered by critics and torn apart by the media. One critic called Basquiat Warhol's mascot, which hit him really hard. The friendship never really recovered, and Basquiat severed ties with Warhol. Despite the press attacks, there was a genuine love and respect between the two artists. Warhol was one of the few people he would listen to when it came to advice on curbing his drug use. Just over a year after their friendship ended, Warhol died suddenly during a routine operation. Basquiat was devastated. He became increasingly isolated, and his heroin addiction and depression grew out of control.
En ese tiempo vendían droga por todos los sitios en Nueva York. Imagino que pues trauma, un cojón de cosas que estaba en la mente, racismo, pues. Fuck. Shit.
A year later, he too would be dead.
Oh my god! Fuck.
Is there any anger in you? Any anger in your
Of course there is. Yeah, of course there is.
Talk about that. Tell me what the anger is. What are you angry about?
Unable to...
Solamente yo siento un montón de frustración y Fuck me. Nada más con las pausas y con lo ilustrado en el video me da como que ansiedad, como que él quería hacer más y quería hacer ciertas cosas y como que no lo escuchaban. Eso yo lo odio. ¿Sabes que cuando tú estás hablando y hablando de algo que te importa mucho y como que todo el mundo lo ignora?
Deal with the demands that fame brought him in 1988 at the age of just 27.
Ay, Dios mío,
Jean-Michel Basquiat, the most successful black artist in history, died from a heroin overdose. His meteoric rise and often controversial career had lasted for just 7 years. Basquiat was an artist who was as dedicated to his craft and just as aware of his legacy as Michelangelo or Picasso. Like all of the artists I've looked at in this Great Art Explained series, Jean-Michel Basquiat was driven, ambitious, and worked extremely hard. When Madonna lived with him, she said she would wake up at 4 a.m. and would find him still painting. He had a desperate need to create, and in his short career, he would produce over 2,000 works of art.
Por lo menos hay bastante tipo de arte de él hoy en día. Por lo menos cada momento que él pasó, él no lo pasó para no pintar. Él desesperadamente quería pintar. Enseñó un poquito del coraje de él y de la absoluta y lo que era que tenía hacia el arte. Y lo digo de buena forma, como la obsesión de algo que tú sabes que tú eres bueno y quieres probarle a todo el mundo y sigues haciéndolo y sigues haciéndolo. Y también porque paga bastante. Pero no solamente es por el dinero. Si tú estás haciendo eso tanto y tanto y tanto, no solamente es por el dinero. Debe haber algo más. Y bastante claro por lo ilustrado en el video. Lo que es.
But he would never compromise to reach his goal, never dilute the message. His raw and brutal works draw on the problems faced by African Americans in the US. They are as relevant now as they were 40 years ago.
Definitivamente.
Yet despite his importance, there are almost no works by him in public collections. Not a single one in the UK, and very few internationally. Untitled had been in the same private collection since it was bought in 1984 for $19,000. When it came up for auction in 2017, it reached the highest price ever paid for a work, not just by a black artist,
Eso yo he
but by
escuchado, que
any
como
American
100
artist,
millones o algo.
including Andy Warhol. $110
110,
million.
cerca. Eso es lo que yo he escuchado.
His art is inextricably linked to his life, his charisma and drive, his race, his talent, and his untimely ending. His works live on as a testament to his talent for placing the immediacy of the everyday into his art. Jean-Michel Basquiat's career was brief and spectacular, but continues to cast a long shadow over the art world.
Buen video, buen video, buen video. Probablemente si el arte que él vendió, bueno, él no vendió, sino como que el arte se vendió por 110 millones de dólares. Yo diría que el tipo es uno de los mejores en la historia. Aunque no es necesariamente el costo de una pieza de arte, no necesariamente es conectada a cuán buen arte es, sino como que pues hay algo de reconocimiento que la pintura era buena y que el tipo era un monstruo pintando. Nada, buen video de Great Art Explained.